Hello everyone and welcome to our new Iceberg series about the Second World War. This is a 10-part video series that dives into the World War II iceberg. Every section of the iceberg has its own separate video. As the videos and the hierarchy in the iceberg progresses, we will be dealing with topics that are lesser known and more mysterious. Due to time constraints, I will not be going into a lot of detail about the topics in the iceberg. However, if there is a particular topic that is of interest to you, mention it in the comments below and I will make a detailed video about that topic for you. Before we dive into the video, if you like my content and want to see more of it, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Our first entry from the topmost tier is called Die Gloke. As compared to some of the other mysteries of the war, this one is quite new, dating back to the year 2001 in which the author Nick Cook publishes a book called The Hunt for Point Zero, in which he states that this other author in his book, The Truth About the Wonder Weapon, initiated the idea of a German wonder weapon called as the Die Gloke. Igor Witkowski, the author who spoke about this first, claims to have come across evidence of this wonder weapon when going through World War II documents which had been declassified by the Polish government. One of the documents, as he claims, was an affidavit from SS General Jakob Sporenberg, who confessed to ordering the murder of 60 people who had the knowledge of the project. However, despite his claims, the reception he received from the scientific community for this revelation is somewhat negative. Many people believe it to be a hoax due to lack of evidence associated with the wonder weapon. Whether it is a hoax or not is something that the governments would know about. However, if it is the truth, this has to be one of the closest and best guarded secrets of Nazi Germany till date. The legend of the lost gold train is one that bridges the gap between myth and reality. The story goes as follows. Towards the end of the war, the Nazis were desperate to hide their loot and plunder from the advancing Allied army. Therefore, they loaded a heavily armored train with gold, jewelry, and art in order to send it back to Germany, which they had done throughout every city that they looted. However, this time the train did not reach Germany and has never been found since. Now, there have been many reasons as to why this story is fake or real. For starters, it was a well-known fact that the Nazis were known to loot cities during the war and send it all back to Germany. This proves that there were multiple versions of the Golden Train going to and from Germany. According to local lore, the train is said to be hidden in a secret tunnel in the Owl Mountains near the Polish town of Worbozich. This lore is not entirely made up, as this area was part of the Reese project, which involved a series of underground secret tunnels built by the Germans. Naturally, numerous searches have been undertaken to search for this lost train, all ending in the same conclusion. As the years passed, the interest in the train died down until 2015 when two treasure hunters, Peter Koper and Andreas Richter, claimed to have located the train using a ground-penetrating radar, which sparked interest in the train again. However, more than 70 years after the war, no such train has been found, raising the question, did the train even exist or was it just a popular myth? During World War II, many soldiers from various nations were declared missing in action. These soldiers went missing under circumstances that left their fate unknown, whether due to the chaos of battle, capture by enemy forces, or other reasons. The mystery surrounding these missing soldiers continues to intrigue historians and the public, as efforts to locate and identify them persist even today. Over 72,000 American soldiers are still unaccounted for from World War II, and estimates suggest that several thousand soldiers remain missing from the Soviet Union. Some of the notable cases include 2nd Lieutenant Alexander Bonneman Jr., whose remains were discovered in 2015 on the island of Tarawa, more than 70 years after he was killed in action. Another example is Lieutenant Michael Blasey, who was initially buried as an unknown soldier at the Tomb of the Unknowns. Blasey was later identified through DNA testing in 1998 and reinterred in his family's plot. Heinrich Muller, also known as Gestapo Muller, was one of the highest-ranking Nazi officials during World War II, serving as the head of the Gestapo. On the 1st of May 1945, 8 days before Germany's unconditional surrender, Muller was last sighted and never seen from since then. Many theories have emerged which try to answer the question of his disappearance. Some speculate that he died in Berlin during its fall, however, no body matching his description has even been recovered. It is also worthwhile to note that while a body matching his description has not been found, that does not rule out the possibility of his death in Berlin, as during that time there were thousands of disfigured bodies. The authorities simply did not have the time to cross-check each and every body. Also, plain simple human error could have also been the possibility of not being able to identify him. Another theory that could be a possibility is the fact that he could have run away to South America, either Brazil or Argentina, which were popularly known to be Nazi-friendly countries and the final destination of many prominent Nazi leaders such as Adolf Eichmann. Nevertheless, evidence of him being dead or even being alive after the war has never been come across, making his disappearance one of the biggest mysteries of the war. As mentioned in the last topic, it was no secret that some South American countries, especially Argentina, were a safe haven for Nazi officials. Towards the end of the war, numerous high-ranking Nazi officials and collaborators fled Europe for Argentina to escape justice. What makes this even more bizarre is how they managed to get into Argentina. Among other routes, one of the most shocking is with the help of the sympathetic Vatican clergy who helped these SS officers get to Argentina. Under President Juan Perón, who had favorable views on Europeans and harbored anti-communist sentiments, the Germans were able to easily get into the country. Prominent SS officers such as Adolf Eichmann, Joseph Mengele, and Erich Priebke were some of the few who fled to Argentina. However, post-war efforts by the Allied countries and a Mossad operation by Israeli intelligence meant that some of the SS officers faced justice. Adolf Eichmann was one of the notable examples of being kidnapped by the Mossad to be extradited to Israel and put on trial. Other notable examples include Erich Priebke, who was involved in the Nanking Massacre in Rome in 1944, where 355 Italian civilians were killed. He was extradited to Italy in 1995 and sentenced to life imprisonment in 1998. Another example includes Joseph Schwamberger, who was an SS captain in charge of several camps in Poland. He was arrested in 1987 and extradited to West Germany in 1990 to be sentenced to life imprisonment. While we did see success in bringing some of the perpetrators to justice, a vast number of mid-tier Nazi officials were never extradited and escaped justice until their death. Anne Frank was a German-born Jewish girl who is widely known for her diary in which she documented her life in hiding from the Nazi officials during the German occupation of Netherlands. Eventually, on the morning of August 4, 1944, the SS raided her house based off of a tip-off and captured Anne and her family. They would eventually be sent to a concentration camp, following which Anne would be transferred to Auschwitz, where she eventually passed away. Her father was the only surviving member of the family who, upon return to the Netherlands, discovered his daughter's diary pages and decided to publish them. There are two versions of Anne's diary. Version A, which was the original diary which contained unedited notes and unfiltered thoughts. Version B is an edited version by Anne herself. It was edited after Anne heard Dutch officials in exile broadcasting the possibility of publishing personal accounts and diaries of survivors after the war, which made Anne edit her diary as she hoped for it to be published. Since its original publication, there have also been censored sections of the diary that did not make it into the publication. However, following the conclusion of an ownership dispute in 2001, the new editions have incorporated these censored pages which talk about her sexuality and her thoughts on menstruation, among other things. The Nanking Massacre, or commonly known as the Rape of Nanking, was a horrific episode of mass murder and mass rape committed by the Japanese troops against the residents of Nanking, which was the capital of China during the Second Sino-Japanese War. The Battle of Nanking was fought between the Republic of China and the Imperial Japanese Army, which lasted for 12 days. After 12 days of fighting, the Japanese army was victorious and was in control of the Chinese capital city, following which the massacre of Nanking began. Records state that the massacre lasted about 6 weeks, but it is important to know that Japanese atrocities against Chinese civilians had started much before. During the Japanese advance of troops from Shanghai to Nanking, the Japanese had a wave of destruction, killing anything and everything on its way to the capital city. Once they won the battle for Nanking, started the massacre of that city. For 6 weeks, the Japanese indiscriminately murdered and raped the civilian population of Nanking. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East estimated that in the first month of the occupation, the Japanese soldiers committed about 20,000 cases of rapes. It did not stop there, as after the rape, they would often kill the women and mutilate their bodies. There are several other accounts of what happened there by people who survived and authors who have written books, making the massacre of Nanking one of the darkest times in human history. Similar to the Nuremberg trials, the Allied countries set up a war crimes trial in Japan called the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, or commonly known as the Tokyo Trials. The trial included 12 judges from the nations of Australia, France, Canada, USA, India, Netherlands, New Zealand, UK, Soviet Union, Philippines, and China. The purpose of the trial was to judge the high-ranking Japanese military officials and their involvement in war crimes. 28 civilian military defendants were charged under the court, out of which 6 defendants were sentenced to death by hanging. However, during the entire process of trial, one very prominent name from the defendants' list was missing: the Japanese Emperor Hirohito and his family. It was widely speculated the extent to which the emperor was involved in the war crimes of the Japanese army during the war. However, the United States, for strategic and stability reasons, decided to exclude any evidence that would incriminate the emperor and his family from the trial. Justice William Webb of Australia and Justice Henry Bernard of France were notable judges of the trial that were against Hirohito not being included in the trial. Justice Webb famously noted that no emperor can escape responsibility by claiming that they were just following the advice of their cabinet. If a war crime or a war has happened under their reign, they are the ones that are responsible for it. Several scholars, while looking into the exact involvement of the monarch in Japan's war crimes, have found out that oftentimes the emperor's office would sign off on documents allowing the use of chemical weapons, as well as knew the mistreatments suffered by the prisoners of war in Nanking, doing nothing about it. The Sugiyama memo, written by Army Chief of Staff, details meeting with Hirohito, which show the emperor's involvement in military discussions. The diaries of Kaido Koichi, Hirohito's closest advisor, also show insights into the emperor's involvement in wartime decision-making. Direct evidence of the emperor's involvement in war crimes is hard to come by, as the country did everything to protect him. A notable example of that is the reluctance of the defendants to incriminate their emperor during the trials, due to their loyalty as well as the cultural and social factors. One notable example was General Tojo, who was the Prime Minister of Japan during the war. Tojo took full responsibility of Japan's actions, essentially exonerating Hirohito from the blame. His testimony was seen as an effort to protect the emperor and maintain national unity. This brings us to the end of the first part of the Iceberg and our video. Do mention in the comments which of these topics intrigued you the most. Before we go, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel, as it helps me a lot. Stay tuned for the next part, which is coming soon. Have a great day.